everyone. Happy Saturday. We're here with Lady Pauline and my co host, Mr. Glenn Greenwich, the Honorable Mayor of Southern Boulevard, and you're listening to Our World, Our Power show. Today we have a special guest. Her name is Brenda Jones and Donna Coles, and they are Meet the Playwright.
So we're having another round of Meet the Playwright at JCal. And what date?
It is Thursday, the 17th of November. Curtain time is 8 o'clock. You better be there or I will find you.
All right.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
well, let's give it to Brenda. Go ahead, Brenda.
Okay, well,
Tell
thank you
us
very much, sir.
a little bit about this month's show.
This play, that will be running November the 17th at 8 o'clock, just in case you didn't get that the first time. It is named Widows and Warriors. It is a fantastic, but I'm not going to tell you everything because otherwise you won't show up. But sitting right next to me is Donna Coles. She is this month's playwright, and I think I'll just let her kind of talk about herself. Again, the 17th, Thursday, 8 p.m. Oh, by the way, it's the big F word, free. You have no excuse. Donna?
Donna, welcome to the show.
Well, I am very excited to be here. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about Widows and Warriors. It is a fascinating play that I hope you will find, as I do, fascinating. From the standpoint, it's about two iconic women, Coretta Scott King and Betty Shabazz, and their lifetime journey from the time they were born to the time they met these two men, to the lives that they led with them until their widowship and beyond. So this play is one that can be enjoyed by anyone, young or old. It will teach us something about our women and our Black history.
Donna, now tell me what made you come up with this title and this particular story that you wanted to tell?
Well, to be very honest with you, when I met my husband, he lived not far from the house where Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz had lived when they were bombed. And he took me to their home, and we started talking about it. And from time to time, we continued to talk about the perils and their life. And then also Martin Luther King in the 60s and Malcolm X were two very iconic men, leaders of the Black communities. But we also didn't know a lot about their wives. And I started thinking about their wives, particularly at the time when these men died and how they were able to go through various things. And I started to compare them and look at things that were similar and things that were not. And I think it's a story worth telling, and so I did.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty great. That's such a great thing. You know, we were kind of off camera a little bit, and we had talked a little bit about how, in my estimation, women are warriors just to have gone through their lives with their husbands for whatever reasons, and especially these two particular women had some tragedy that is, I can't even begin to imagine to be reflective of these iconic men who were such great leaders in our community that people relied on, looked to, and were empowered by. And yet there's two stories, one a very highlighted and
Right.
one kind of, left out of the limelight. So how did you handle those kind of differences and their lives, before and after?
I lost a lot of sleep. I lost a lot of sleep because, there were things in my research. This play is a figment of my imagination
Okay.
combined with reality and history.
Okay. Okay.
And when I first wrote this play, which was about 4 or 5 years ago, taking a playwriting class, I really wasn't sure if I was going to ever do anything with it. My husband kept urging me to do something, and then the teacher told me, why don't you try to do something with this? And I'm going to take this and take you with it, and we're going to go someplace off Broadway. And I was kind of hesitant, and then I looked at these women more and more and more. And in looking at these two women, Coretta Scott King was loved
Yes.
by the country. And when her husband died, people came, thousands and thousands of people from all over the world. Malcolm King, together, maybe. But Malcolm by himself, absolutely. Not revered as much as Martin Luther King. And when he died, people scattered away from Betty, as opposed to when Martin died, people were there for Coretta. So they were very, very different women, but still two women with the loss of their love. And so it was difficult for me to take that and put it together in a way that would resonate for people. These two women were not only wives, they were mothers.
Mm-hmm.
They were neighbors. They had their own lives and their own problems to deal with as well. That's never been told. And I want everyone to come to see my play because I tell that story.
Powerful, powerful.
Now, Brenda, you got another play underneath your belt. How do you feel about this one now? How does this one?
Every play, and for those who are just kind of tuning in, Meet the Playwright is a monthly series at the Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning, which is known as JCAL. And each month there's a new play that's not necessarily linked together other than the authors, or excuse me, the playwrights themselves are BIPOC, are people of color. Male, female, doesn't matter. This play is particularly interesting for me because it is not only historical, it is also taking a look at what a woman becomes. You can be the tragic widow of and fill in the missing blank, but after the cameras are down, the reporters have left, what does the tragic widow do?
Correct.
You can't be tragic and noble at 24 hours a day because after all, your husband has now passed away. What do? You have kids. If your husband was famous or infamous, depending on how the public choose to look at you, how you live your life, how you go to the grocery store, how your kids go out and play in the backyard. Do they have a backyard? Everything has a completely different meaning because you are now just a woman trying to make it.
By yourself.
By yourself. Then you're also the wife of someone that everybody looks to, so you have to fulfill, to a certain extent, a certain image. You know, so it's sort of as they say, oh, she's a widow. And what does that mean? That means your husband has passed away, but after that,
life goes on.
Life goes on, but how does life go on if you are under the spotlight? And that is the difference. That is, I think, what Jackie Kennedy went through. That is what Betty Shabazz went through. That is what Coretta Scott King went through, because you're married to the icon, but it doesn't define you. And that's what the play is about, and that's really why I said, Donna, give me the play.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Now, how do you really feel that the public viewed Malcolm X's wife? What do you really think? I mean, down deep.
I think that they just saw her as his wife. I don't think that they gave her any special credence as being his wife. I thought they looked at her as Betty X.
What did she do exactly? What did she, her career, what did she do?
Well, she was much more than Betty X. She in herself had her fame to claim. She had gone to school to be a nurse. She was in the nursing practitioner field when she was in the Islamic faith with her husband. And, you know, Muslim women, yes, while they have to be in accordance with their husband, she and Malcolm had an agreement that she had just as much say as he did in his decision making.
Good for her.
You know, so she, in her own way, in her quiet strength that she had, she did not feel dominated by her husband. She said he was a very caring and gentle man. And I honestly had the opportunity to meet Betty.
Oh, did you?
At an event in, I think it was 1989, when I worked in television along with Brenda. I went to a luncheon, and I had the esteemed pleasure of sitting next to Betty on one side and Hazel Dukes on the other side. And we had a girlfriend conversation.
Wow.
And she said to me, "Where'd you get that dress?" I had on a dress with some leopard print in it. And she said, "Tell me where you got that, girl. Where'd you get that dress?" She was such a warm and wonderful, down-to-earth person. And let us not forget, when her husband died, she had twin children in her belly.
Yes.
And she had to raise 6 girls by herself. She had to keep her strength. She had to become a warrior.
Mm-hmm.
And so she did. I think that the world respected her as she grew after his death and went to conventions and spoke out and started a women's group when she lived in Westchester to care for women and make sure that they had food and comfort and clothing, the children were well cared of. So it wasn't at the death of Malcolm that she became a strong woman. She was always a strong woman.
woman.
Yes.
Okay. That's interesting. Now, Malcolm's wife, not Malcolm's wife, I mean Martin Luther King's wife.
What's your bracelet? Because it's clicking.
What is the two differences do you see as far as when they passed away?
Well, I think that everybody immediately went to Coretta's aid.
Okay.
And because of that, she was very strong also. She was a very strong-willed woman. But she was in the limelight much more than Betty during her husband's life. And I think what happened is she got the strength right after that to continue his work, and she led that march in Memphis with 3 of her children. So she had already been engaged in so many things with high-level popularity, and that continued until her dying day.
As well as the children.
As well as the children.
Yeah, because Martin Luther King's children has always been in the force
Absolutely.
as opposed to,
And let us not forget that Martin came from a historic community of pastors.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
they had a very strong following.
That's true.
Whereas Malcolm X was a self-made man from the time he went to prison and changed his life until he went into the Islamic faith and until he decided to take a journey on his own and started going worldwide. So they had very different paths. Although they were iconic, they had very different paths.
Yes, yeah, I realize that.
I think that really ties into why Coretta had an easier way, because her husband had already won the Nobel Peace Prize. So
That's true.
America had approved of him. Whereas Malcolm was a black Muslim, which at that time was a threatening thing to the general American public. And when he got up and
still
said,
is.
It still is.
no argument. And then when he got up and said, well, we need to take it by any means necessary. We weren't supposed to say that. That wasn't something that was supposed to happen.
Right.
So you're not supposed to threaten us.
Martin said, we will vote, we are Americans. And Malcolm said, the ballot or the bullet.
Yeah.
So it was a very different philosophy that they had. And so you had a fractured population, so to speak, where some people, vacillated back and forth. Some people were staunch, I'm with Malcolm, and some were staunch, I'm with Martin.
The thing that I recall about Malcolm, he was a Garveyite.
His father.
He really was a demonstration of Marcus Garvey's principles in terms of keeping blackness together from an economic standpoint and a social economic standpoint. And of course, that wasn't what Martin was much more part of the norm, the natural
The integration.
grace.
He wanted the
Yes.
integration.
He wanted the integration. He wanted to be part of the fabric of this country.
Well, as Malcolm said, you didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on you.
Yes.
And so their philosophies were very different. Absolutely.
But the thing about it, which is interesting for me, I know this is about their wives, but the two of them really had an important part in Black America, because there were people that didn't believe turned the other cheek.
Yes.
That just weren't going to do it. They had enough, and they were ready to fight. And so he talked to that, and Martin talked for the peaceable. But the thing is that they were just about to get together when when both of them got assassinated.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at one point, Malcolm had been invited to speak, and Martin was in jail. And Coretta stopped him and spoke to him and said, in so many words, you have nerve coming here and speaking to our congregation. And by the time he finished speaking to her, she had a very different opinion of him.
Yeah.
And when she went to see Martin in jail, she relayed that to him. So yes, they were getting closer together. Would they have ever come to one concrete conclusion that they both agreed with? I don't know. I mean, we will never know.
We'll never know.
But
yeah.
we do know that one of the things that they both did, they loved their people. They loved black people.
Yes.
So on that, they were very much united.
Was there any communication with the two of them after the assassinations of their husbands?
Absolutely. Some people say, they were great friends. But on my research, I found that they were friendly. I wouldn't say they became best friends. And there was a convention that they both attended, and they were both speakers. And from that point, they did have an opportunity to connect with each other. And even prior to that, when Malcolm was killed, they did send condolences out to Betty, to let them know of their sorrow, at his tragic death. And what was more tragic, that both men died at the age of 39.
Yeah.
Yes, that's very
Untimely
unfortunate.
death.
Yes.
Wow.
In the prime of their life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did Malcolm X's wife survive financially?
That was very, very hard for her. And her finances came from a lot of donations. She finally did get a job. She became employed. She worked at Medgar Evers. She moved on. She got a doctorate. And so she was able to take care of her children and do pretty well.
Because you don't hear that much about that part.
You don't hear that much about her, nor do you hear about how Coretta survived either. Although she set up so many foundations, but she had, as we keep saying, she had a very different situation. She was in a position where she had more prominence and more money. And at one point, Betty had said to Malcolm, we need to start thinking about putting some things aside for ourselves. And that's when they were in the Nation of Islam. He did not want to do that. He was really giving everything. He kept no money whatsoever. So they had no money at all. But she was able, through her perseverance and her intelligence, she was able to secure jobs and make a life for herself.
That's incredible because it's wonderful that you're doing this play. A lot of people, don't realize, the most important things that they did in their lives, and how it impacted the futures of today.
Absolutely. I mean, and I will tell you that this is just we had to, because of the time frame, this is just a snapshot of the full, this is not the full play, this is a snapshot of the play. But what I will say about these two women, based on how they were so courageous, a warrior has courage, not anger. And that's an African proverb.
Yeah.
And so they were not angry as much as they were courageous. I'm sure sometimes in the middle of the night, they were howling in anger and their tears were flowing.
They had to be.
But I think that they had a bigger goal. Malcolm X told Betty that he was going to get killed. And he said to her, they're going to kill me. Surely they're going to kill me. But I want you to remember Lot's wife. Don't look back.
Wow.
And she never did look back.
Yeah.
She had the courage to go forward as a warrior, and she never did look back, but she kept his name alive.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, they had a picture of Malcolm in every room, and they had someone coming in to help them clean, and the woman said, could you take the pictures down? But they wanted to remember him, and so they did.
Okay, we're getting ready to take a commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Make sure to download the WGJS Radio app from the Apple Store or from the Google Play Store.
Do you want to start a video podcast but don't know where to start? Or maybe you've been podcasting for a while but you're bored with the traditional audio-only format. Either way, I've got just the thing. Ecamm Live is the #1 choice for busy podcasters who want to easily create professional-looking video podcasts. But why? They're more engaging for your audience, and video keeps their attention, so they're more likely to stick around and become part of your community. Let me show you just how easy it is with Ecamm Live. You can drag and drop graphics right onto your show to make it more professional. If you have a co-host or guests, bringing them onto your show is a breeze. You can even tweak the look of your guest video no matter where they are. And you can set up your scenes in advance, so when your show starts, you can play your intro and easily switch between your scenes during the show. So it really simplifies your workflow and eliminates the need for a bunch of editing. Plus, your isolated audio tracks are saved right onto your computer along with your high-quality video files. So there's no more waiting for a link to download your files. They're right there. And once you're done, you can upload it to your syndication platform. It's time to give your audience what they really want. So if you're ready to become a visual authority and take your podcast to the next level with video, join the Ecamm fam. Thousands of podcasters have already made the switch. We're just waiting on you.
Donna Coles and Brenda Jones here with
Okay.
us in the studio here at Our World, Our Power show. You're listening to Lady Pauline and Mr. Glenn Greenwich. Donna, I would like to know, when did you start writing and why did your writing come into plays as opposed to like writing a book or doing a journal and stuff like that?
You know, when I was a little girl, I used to write every so often. I used to write a lot of poetry, and I guess one year there was a Halloween party at the neighborhood movie house, and my father took me, and I did a poem about a hobo. My mother was not too pleased, I have to tell you, but I actually won first prize, which was, you know, free movie tickets and popcorn for the next week.
Wow.
So,
Hey.
and I, you know, from time to time I would write little things, or in school I would notice that my composition was, you know, always got an A, or I was called up to class to read it. And then I kind of let it go. But then after my mother died for many years, I thought about writing about her life and writing about Harlem. My family grew up in Harlem. I was the Bronx kid.
Okay.
And so I did start writing a book, and my husband really encouraged me to think about, why don't you publish this book? Why don't you do something? Why don't you just keep writing? Then when he retired from being a teacher, the UFT had some courses that you could take, many different courses, and he decided to take some. I also had the opportunity to do so. So I went to the UFT. I started taking playwriting courses and improvisation. Through that, the teacher told me, you're a natural. You know, he wanted me to do some acting. He said, finally, he said, look, you've written 4 plays. Stop fooling around. It's been years now. You need to take these plays to the theater. I have 2 people. I'm going to shop it around. It'll be off Broadway, but you'll get your foot in the door. And so I said, okay. And then my husband passed, and then the teacher passed during COVID. So now I have this play. I'm ready to do something with it. And my friend Brenda says to me, give me the play, Donna.
Did she say it like that?
She said it like that. She said it
I'm
like
being
that.
accused publicly.
And so I said, oh, Brenda, you know, she said, give me the play. And she told me about J. Cal.
Yeah.
So I did give her the play. It was a little harder now when we started going over it, and there were some changes, and we can't put the whole play on. And it was my challenge now to step out and do something. And so, you know, I said, well, this is it. These 2 women, I understood their story a little stronger, and I decided, yes, I'm going to go for it. So here I sit today.
Because I know where she lives.
You know where everybody lives, Brenda.
You got to do what you got to do. Any means necessary, okay?
Oh, wow.
What I will say is, if I thought Donna's play was, oh, okay, Jane goes to the grocery. She buys a box of cereal. And then she went home. I would have said, oh, that's really wonderful. Can I get back to you on that? But because the subject matter was something that I hadn't seen or heard or done before, it's like, yeah. And because this is a Queens theater, and Malcolm X definitely lived in East Elmhurst, folks, for sure, et cetera. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? So let's look at what it is to be a widow. Let's look at what it is to be a warrior, because while we have Woman King in the movies with Viola Davis, not everybody has to be there with a spear. I'm not saying hers is wrong. God knows I'm not saying that. But it's just a matter of a warrior doesn't always have to be there at the door with the gun at the head or the spear. Sometimes being a warrior is quiet. Sometimes being a warrior is a constant battle. It doesn't have to be violent or screaming or gore and scream. It is sometimes just making it from one day to another. And both women had to find their way without the icon that they were married to.
Yeah, and sustain families.
And sustain families.
So it wasn't even just themselves. It was really all of it that entails being a mother and a caregiver and a caretaker for the family, and after dealing with such an emotional, traumatic
Loss.
And being
Loss.
pregnant at the same time.
Can you imagine?
No, I can't.
Well, the thing I think that's so hard for her is that after that tragedy, and trying to, resuscitate him and not being able to, but after that tragedy, to find people moving away from you instead of coming to you, and still getting death threats. After he was gone, the death threats did not stop. Now the death threats came to her.
Oh,
Really?
I did not
Yes.
know that.
Yes, yes. So there's a lot that has not been revealed about these two women.
No.
Let's look at the fact that although Martin was, revered by everyone, he had a roving eye.
Yes,
And,
I know that. Yeah.
that came out. And how did this woman who was held on a pedestal now feel when people were saying that, he hasn't been faithful, There's a lot of indiscretions. And how did they get through that? And then when he died, how did that leave her feeling?
Yeah.
So these are things that when we think about these two great women, we don't think about the mental and emotional stress that they had to persevere through to keep a strong family together.
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm X's mother was put in a mental institution.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm sure that Betty had to think about that with the loss of her husband.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stress because as a mother, as a wife, my husband has just been killed by whomever. So now I have 4 kids, and I'm still pregnant with 2 with Betty, and you have 3 or 4 with Coretta.
Mm-hmm.
How do you send them to school? Because you don't know who just shot your husband. How can you give them that 3, 4, 5, 6 hours at school because you don't know who's watching your kids?
But nobody ever talked about it.
No.
Nobody ever talked about it.
No.
So that's that stress. It's like, oh, he got shot. Oh, that's tragedy. Yeah, but the next day, the next week, the next month, my kids have to go back to school.
Especially after the funeral. You
yeah,
might
so
have
it's
a
like,
week home, but that's about it.
How can I send my kids out when I don't know who's behind the bush, for lack of a better way of putting it?
Yeah.
How do I get through that? So the fact that both women in their own particular ways got through that and succeeded, to me is like, that's the warrior part.
Yeah.
That's the warrior part.
Yeah, it
I could
really
be a
is.
widow, but
Right.
you mess with my kids.
Is anywhere stated how the children felt and how they got through going back to school after their father passed away?
Well, there is something where they showed their first Christmas without Martin Luther King and how they had to deal with it. And it was, it was a little traumatic for the children, yes, and for her as well. And, when it comes to Betty, there were 2 children who never met their father. So I'm sure she had to tell them stories, and she baked cookies, and they did different things that the father would have done or did do when he was alive. He liked to come home and wake them up when he had been out of town and talk with them and sit with them. And so I'm sure that was a big missing time for them when Daddy's not coming home anymore.
Yeah.
So, these are the things that we we don't think about, when we think of these women, we look at them as, oh, they're so strong. But what gave them that strength?
Yes.
What did they have to pull out of themselves to ignore certain things? Can you imagine Coretta Scott King going to church after the FBI had revealed those photos of her husband swimming nude with a white woman? How did she hold her head up?
Mm.
You know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And years later, she's fighting for him to get a national holiday for his birthday. How do you equate her emotions and doing this at the same time?
Now, I wanted to know, those pictures, were they fabricated or did it really happen?
Well, they said there were several pictures that were given, and on some of the records that I researched and some of the things that I saw online, he did not say no, and in some instances he did not say yes. But they were definitely him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just fascinated. What had you choose the two of them? I know they were iconic husbands, and they had this tragedy.
How did I make that choice?
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many. I've also written about other women in a different vein.
Okay.
But I think when I met Betty Shabazz, she stayed in my mind.
Okay. Okay.
She just stayed in my mind because she was so warm and friendly. And at that time, my daughter, who was in middle school, was in a play that very next week about Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz.
Wow.
And I said that to her, and she took a sticky and wrote a note to my daughter saying, good luck playing. Yes. So I think that because I have a daughter,
yeah,
who is playing Betty, I think that kind of stayed with me. But when I started thinking about these two women, it just like popped into my mind. My husband and I had been talking about Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz, actually. And then it just popped into my mind. And I started looking at the parallels. Their husbands died at 39.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Both of their houses were set on fire,
Right.
That's true.
Right.
Their houses were set on fire. I started looking at the similarities. When I started looking at the similarities, then I started thinking, but what about the differences?
Yeah.
Malcolm was not revered.
Yeah.
Most people did not like Malcolm. Only people who really said we have self-determination and wanted blacks to have their own and not necessarily looking at integration loved Malcolm.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Ozzie Davis eulogized him and said, our shining black prince,
Prince,
Yeah.
yeah.
people started to look at him in a little different vein.
Yeah.
But through all of this, these two women lived through hell. When you cannot imagine, I cannot imagine
Yeah.
having your mate tell you that they know they're going to be
die
killed.
Yeah.
And then Martin Luther King kind of prophesied it when he said, you may get to the mountain. I may not be there when you get there.
Yeah.
He also
They all said that
stated-
he had a premonition.
Yeah.
So when you look at these two men telling that to their wives, how are they sleeping at night and how are their wives sleeping at night? You know why? Because they love black people.
Yeah.
And they love themselves and they love their children, and it gave them the will to go on. Out of no way, these two women made a way.
Yeah. It's true. So true.
Now, looking back to that era, the 60s, and looking at today's era, how different do you think, if he was still here, what difference would they have made? Both of them. What impact would they have had?
I really have to ponder that question. You asked me a heavy question.
I see the bear trap
that is-
waiting.
That's a very heavy
That is
question.
a heavy question. Yeah.
And for me to give you a transparent and honest answer, I don't know. And the reason that I don't know is because let's look back at the 60s. We did not have the social ability,
Right.
and we didn't have the communication.
Social media and
We
communication.
watched television when we saw Bull Connor put dogs on people. We heard of Malcolm X through word of mouth unless we went to the rally.
Right. Right.
And
That's true.
even Martin Luther King wasn't always publicized.
No.
No.
So our ability to really draw a conclusion about things. And only when it was fantastic to the press did we know. It was very controlled. Now it's not as controlled. Now it's much more worldwide, www, World Wide Web.
Yeah.
So I think it would have had a greater impact. But would the mindset have been different? I don't know. So that's my answer. The answer is I don't know.
Because I also think that in that era, in the 60s, and to a certain extent to the 70s, you had almost, I hate saying this, monolithic mindset for black folks. We all believe that we should be able to integrate and become part of the American fabric.
We wanted that very badly, didn't we?
But that's what we were taught we were supposed to believe, and we were ostracized for not being part of the fabric. But when we tried to be part of the fabric, we were ostracized. So no matter how you got it, you were. But we were in that, in my opinion, that mousetrap. Nowadays, you don't have all black people, all people of color thinking the same way. So if you were to say a particular orange president might have black followers, for those of us of our age who may have been alive in the 60s, we'll be polite about that one, we all go, oh, no way. But yeah, way.
But I want to say something also at that time. While we had the followers of Martin Luther King, let us not forget that we also had the Black Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
And the Black Panthers were self-determination.
Yes,
They started the first free breakfast program that then the government took credit for. They did a lot of good work. They listened to the Constitution and said, we have the right to bear arms.
Yes.
And they were taken down for it. Where today, people who believe in Donald Trump walk around with guns all the time. So it was very different back then. Think about Fred Hampton. Think about those people who were really freedom fighters focusing on black people as opposed to integration. And I think that's where the rub came, because black people had to be in one camp or the other. We had not come to a point where we could fuse things. And that was based on the economy, based on the J. Edgar Hoover influence.
Yes.
And also based on people who had been here and had been to the point where they feel this is a good country and I'm going to get mine. When mindfully, we still haven't got our 40 acres and a mule today.
That's true.
So it was a very different time. I think with all of the social media now, it's much different. And people are called to arms much quicker.
Yeah.
I think people are now fighting more on verbally as opposed to taking it to the streets and burning down things. I think it's very different.
True.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing. No more burning down. Because we've been burning down our own stuff.
Our own community.
Why don't we go down 34th Street and burn down Macy's department store or something like that? That's I'm sorry. We have a way of doing it in our own community. Then we turn around and say, "Oh, we don't have
anything."
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm having worked in it. I will put a pin in media, because in the 60s they told us what they wanted us to hear.
Absolutely.
And we trusted them, because who would lie?
Of course, the press
To
would
find
never
out
lie.
that not only did they lie, they made up stuff. So if you are not a New Yorker, you're not living in Los Angeles, and I'll use them as coastal cities because that's where you get your integration of societies, if you will, of culture. If you're in middle America, you ain't got a clue. So I would believe, as a little girl, what I saw in Life magazine, for those of you who are old enough to remember that, Life magazine or Newsweek or Newsday.
Right.
So what they gave me was what I thought. Why would they lie? Because as a kid, we were taught not to lie. And the news people were telling you the truth. Yeah, they tell you the truth with a little curve to what they wanted you to believe. I think now that we've been through so much, and because social media is social media, and you could go ahead and videotape everything on your cell phone. You don't need to have a camera crew. You don't have the chance to lie as easily.
They still lie.
True.
Well, yeah, I didn't say they didn't lie. I'm just saying you don't lie as easily.
I always look back on the 60s because I was a small child then. And I always say, the way things was back then, they could not remain the same. Things do have to change. because just like they had the discrimination about, you can't go into this restaurant. Well, what happens to McDonald's? I mean, we was gonna have two different McDonald's and Burger King and Fried. I mean, how would people travel? I mean, there's gonna have one plane for black folks and one plane for white folks. We wasn't supposed to. In the bus we sat at the back. Could you have done that in the plane? I'm just sitting down thinking that things had to change.
Oh yeah, they had to change. I just considering that from being here in America,
Mm-hmm.
it to me would almost be like we're looking at South Africa, because how long did apartheid last there? Even when America was going, hey, that's really wrong. We created the problem. Americans created discrimination. We created and kept and revered and fostered more and more and more. I grew up in Colorado, so I didn't know what I was looking at when I was reading Life magazine about bull connors and dogs, and it made no sense to me. I couldn't figure out why white people were so crazy.
Yeah.
And I really thought there was something mental wrong with them from like my little 5-year-old, 6-year-old point of view. It had to be, because everybody knows that if you cut, you bleed. It's all the same red
why
blood.
would you stick a dog on children?
That's what I'm saying, but we created the problem. And so we congratulate ourselves on saying, look at what we've taken care of. Look at South Africa, how bad. We created that. So no matter how you do it, to me, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King had to appeal to that same American public that was congratulating itself on we allow one black kid to go to our school. And we thought, how wonderful. No, it's not. How shameful.
Well, I think there's such a thing as, tokenism. And that was an appeasement.
Yeah.
Let's get one person in, let's get Medgar Evers go to this school, or the Little Rock Five, let them go. We will then make sure that slowly we will get you in. And I think that we have to recognize that we were not brought here as the only group. We are the only group that was brought here unwillingly. Everybody else is an immigrant. Black people were never immigrants.
They were prisoners.
We were brought here in chains to do a task, to make sure that the white economy stayed afloat and prospered.
I love that. That's true.
And when black people, as evidenced by Jacob Lawrence, a black artist, painter, showed the migration of blacks from the South to Chicago. And it showed in one of his paintings how they were beat at the train station because they had no one to pick the tobacco or the cotton. It was the great migration to the North. And so black people thought when you came to the North, it was going to be much better. It was just a different kind of segregation.
Yes.
You were just up south.
The thing that I went to South Africa, and I was actually there during the times when they were having the trials. And, I, got to talk to some of the South Africans and understood this thing about having a pass to go through particular areas and neighborhoods. But my naivety about who I was as a black American didn't get revealed or woken up until I thought about it when I came back. And I'm saying to myself, well, wait a minute. If I'm in a white neighborhood in a nice car, I get stopped. What's the difference between having a card or a pass that says I can go to this particular neighborhood,
Absolutely.
and I have a reason to be in this particular neighborhood, but it was exactly the same thing.
Absolutely.
And that was a brutal wake up to the reality of the racism that I had been experiencing up until that time, but equated the South African thing. Oh, that's different.
Right, that's them.
And that's
It's a subtlety. It's a subtlety.
It is.
It's subtlety, and it's almost like you give permission for it to happen to you because you're really not aware of
Yes.
the effect of it until all of a sudden it's like a slap in the face.
Yes.
You know, or you go to a restaurant and all of a sudden you see everybody else is getting seated before you.
Yeah.
Or you get the seat by the kitchen.
Yeah.
You know, it's those subtle things, and people say, "Oh, I didn't know." You know why you don't know? Because it's your practice, and
Yeah.
practice made perfect.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right, ladies, it's been wonderful having you both here on the show. Please, before we leave, talk about the date, the time, the place, where it's going to
And
be.
how to get any information.
Any fun stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, so from the top, it is Meet the Playwright. It is at JCAL, which is Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning. That is 161-04 Jamaica Avenue. If you're on Jamaica Avenue and they say, you ask somebody, where is it? And they say, go to the church. That is JPAC. It's associated, but it is JCAL 161-04 Jamaica Avenue. It is November the 17th. We have a 8 o'clock curtain time. You will have, it's called Meet the Playwright on purpose because you get to meet the playwright. And we'll actually have a live question and answer session directly following. So you get to say wonderful things about Donna or bad stuff, and I'll have nothing to do with that. We're going to actually end up the year next month on December 22nd. So this is my Christmas present to you, all you adoring public. And the play is called Queen's Girl in the World. There's no way you could make a mistake. That's not a Queen's program.
Absolutely.
But for this month, it is Widows and Warriors by Donna Coles, who is our playwright of the month. And it is the 17th, Thursday the 17th, this coming Thursday at 8 p.m. And we hope to see you there. And for those who are a little confused as to, she didn't say anything about how much the tickets cost. That's because they're free.
Oh, they're free.
So
Oh, that's
therefore,
great.
what you do is you go to jcal.org, jcal.org, click on it, and you will see a little icon that says Meet the Playwright. Click on it, and they'll tell you how to register. We're asking people to register, because we want to make sure we know how many people are coming, and it is a 99-seat theater, and we've been able to fill it up. We expect to do it again with you. So therefore, definitely register because we want to make sure that we have everybody taken care of, and we look forward to seeing you on Thursday.
All right. Ladies, it was wonderful having you on Our World, Our Power show. And,
Just before we go,
oh, yeah.
the Air Train Jazz is up and running Thursdays from 5 to 7.
Which means you'll go to listen to him and then come to the play.
Yes. It's perfect timing. So we'll be done by 7. We're located at the Air Train Terminal, located at the Jamaica Station of Long Island Railroad. And then once we're done there, then you can come over to Meet the Playwrights, which is just up the street.
Absolutely, positively.
And I guess I will be at both events. So if anybody's interested in seeing Lady Pauline, well.
I look
Yeah.
forward to seeing both of you, and I want to thank you so much for having me come
Yeah.
today. It's my first play that's going to be produced. I want to thank you, Brenda, for telling me, give me that play.
Yeah.
And I hope everybody comes and learns and enjoys their time with us. Thank you so much.
Well, the subject matter is amazing, and I'm sure that your play is, given who you are, we'll have a great time.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Take care, guys. Catch you all next week. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Our World Media. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Our World Media #1. And if you want to reach me, you can reach me at 646-340-7271. And have a great week, guys. Catch you.